Arabs do is prohibited from doing, as long as the Sharia didn't prohibit it, or the qawa'id, the principles that we have, don't indicate that it should be avoided. This is really important because there are hadiths that say don't follow the ajam, don't do what the non-Arabs do. Those hadiths are specifically, sometimes specific to the Arabs. So for instance, the Prophet ﷺ said, من يحسن أن يتكلم بالعربية فلا يتكلم بغيرها فإنه يورث النفاق. Whoever is capable of speaking properly in Arabic, he shouldn't speak in other than Arabic because it will cause hypocrisy in his heart. كان مالك يكره رطانة الأعاجم في المسجد. Imam Malik didn't like the non-Arab speaking in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. If you take those hadiths, so what? Our religion means everybody has to become Arab? The Quran says that in the difference of your complexions and your tongues is a sign of God. The Prophet ﷺ spoke Farsi to Abu Huraira when Abu Huraira had stomach ache, and the Prophet ﷺ said to him in Farsi, "Is your stomach aching?" He said, "Yes." The Prophet spoke Habashiyya when Habib came back, gave him a shirt from Ethiopia. He said, "Innaha sana," and he used an Ethiopian word to say it's nice, because she had learned Ethiopian while she was in Ethiopia. He spoke with every tribe according to their dialect. So when the Yemenis came, he spoke Yemeni dialect. And there's an indication that he knew all the languages. So the Prophet ﷺ did not prohibit language. The Quran, even though it's all Arabic, Araba, it turned into Arabic some other terms from other languages. So Firdaus is originally from Persian, right? Paradise, it's from Persian. The Qistas, right, was a Latin term. But the Quran, Arab, ala khilaf. I mean, there's a khilaf about this issue. Imam Suyuti wrote a whole book on this subject. So it's a khilaf issue, because inna anzalnahu Quranan Arabiyan, we sent it down as an Arab Quran. There's a khilaf. But generally, it's and then there's a debate about whether Arabic is the mother tongue or Syrianiyya. من عجائب ما ترى العينان أن سؤال القبر بالسرياني. Imam Suyuti said that in the afterlife everybody speaks Syriani. And there's a hadith, it's weak, but it's there, that حب العرب لي ثلاث لأنني عربي والقرآن عربي ولسان أهل الجنة عربي. I'm Arab, the Quran's Arab, and the tongue of the people of paradise is Arabic. But anyway, if you take those hadiths and say, oh, people can't speak Arabic, or I speak Arabic there, I have to speak to you in Imam Shafi'i's first madhab, because he has different madhab stages of his development, he prohibited buying and selling in other than Arabic. في المذهب القديم. Now the reason for that was, he said, if you're going to buy and sell, it has to be in some language. So why should the Arabi yatanazal? Why should he go down and go down? Why not make the other one learn Arabic? But then he changed his opinion. Because if you're Arab and you speak Persian and you want to sell to a Persian and he doesn't speak Arabic, you're not going to have a sale. So you might as well speak Persian, right? So there's nothing wrong with speaking other languages. It's good to learn Arabic. It's the language of our religion. One of the things about the Ottomans is they never imposed Turkish on other civilizations. So the Ottomans, when they were ruling Egypt, the administrative language was Arabic. When they were ruling Iraq, the administrative language was Arabic, because they didn't have this colonial mentality of imposing. Whereas when the English, no offense to our English brothers and sisters, when the English went to other places, in fact, it's said that the monkeys in India they know language, but they refuse to speak out of fear the English would put them to work. So, but when the English or the French went, they made everything in French and English. So Moroccan administration became French. Algeria became French. In fact, many Algerians lost their Arabic because of the imposition of French. The English, when they conquered, I'm sorry to, point out the English, but they're one of the great colonizers in human history. When the English colonized Ireland, and they say the Welsh are the Irish that couldn't swim, right? When the English conquered Ireland, they cut out the tongues if they spoke Gaelic. So Irish people whose original language was Gaelic don't speak Gaelic anymore except in few areas. They're trying to revive it like they've revived Welsh in Wales as a language. But they lost their tongue, literally, for speaking Gaelic. This happened in Andalusia. They used to cut out the tongues of Quran teachers so they wouldn't teach the Quran. And now we have our community abandoning the Quran when people lost their lives for teaching the Quran. It's amazing. So languages are honored in Islam. Every language, every people's language is their language. And that's why in many cultures, a lot of Arabic names went to those cultures, but they didn't adopt only Arabic names. Just like in the West, most Christian people had names from the Bible. So if you meet Western people, it's David and John and Yohanna, Dawood, Jesus, if you're Hispanic, Jesus. But not all the names. Many of the names are like Laurel, right? From ivy, because they were pagans before they were Christians. And so the spirit world was all embodied in the animal and vegetable kingdom. You had native peoples, Aboriginal peoples named after animals very often. So Native American Indians had names that related to animals. The Bedouin Arabs had names related to animals, Fahad and Nimr and Dhi'ib and Jahash and names like that, right? That's tradition. So the Prophet, when he came, he didn't change everybody's names and make them all get new names, right? They have their names that they had in Jahiliyyah, unless the meaning was against a name. Then he would change it. So if they were like Abdul Lat, he would change it. Or Abdul Atiq, he would change it. But he didn't change names. Hanzala, he didn't change. Talha. Talha is the acacia tree because it's hard and it gives shade. And they used tree names because the Arabs really love trees. So people can use names. They don't have to have an Arabic name. And so you go to like Gule in Turkish, right? You have a name like that. It's a Turkish name, nothing wrong with that. So somebody says, why do you have that name? I mean, my son's named Daniel, right? We were in Mecca, and he was in the restaurant, and some lady said to him, what's your name? And he said, Daniel. And she said, A'udhu billah, that's not a Muslim name. In Mecca, it's like, and he was like in tears. He comes up to me, and I said, what's wrong? He said, she asked my name. I said, Daniel. And then she said it wasn't a Muslim name. And I just went up to her and I said, taqillah. I mean, that's an taqulu ala Allah bighayri ilm. It's a dangerous thing to speak without knowledge. Just shut up. If you don't know something, la taqfu ma laysa laka bi ilm. Don't go in areas you have no knowledge of. The better response is, I've never heard that name, I didn't know Muslims use that name or something. But to say it's not a Muslim name, because Daniel is in the Qasas al-Anbiya of Ibn Kathir. He has a chapter called Bab Daniel. It's in the Hadith. The Indian and Malay Muslims use it as a name for their children, right? It's the reason Arabs don't use it is because it's a very common name amongst Arab Christians, and they don't want to confuse traditionally their children with the Christian children, right? So that's fine. That's urf, if you want to distinguish yourself. Because the Christians have certain names that they use. Most Arabs can identify Christians by their names, whether they're Coptic or Lebanese, or because they use certain names the Muslims don't use, and vice versa. So that's an example just of, you can use any name that's good if it's from your culture. If you want to call your child, a good name, that's fine. Or if you want to use the names like John, if you're a convert to Islam, or you're raised in the West and you want to use John instead of Yahya, the Turks say Mehmet. They don't say Muhammad. They say Mehmet. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's why Joshua becomes Joshua. For instance, in the Quran, you have Ibrahim, which is qira'ah sab'iyya, and then you have Ibrahim, which is a qira'ah sab'iyya. It's a valid recitation. So if you called your son Ibrahim, it's as valid as Ibrahim because it's a sound qira'ah. Or if you want to call him Abraham, there's nothing wrong with that. These are issues that were resolved centuries ago, and they just shouldn't be issues anymore. But this is when ignorance becomes widespread in a community. All these problems arise, and then humility of just not having that basic thing to say, I didn't know that. I mean, people say that, like, really? I didn't know that. Well, gee, do you know everything? I mean, is it really surprising that you should say, I didn't know that? There's lots of things you don't know. I remember years ago, I was in the Emirates, and they brought these tiny little finger bananas that I'd never seen before from India. And I was like, subhanallah, I've never seen a banana like that. And the sheikh said to me, there are many things you've never seen in this world. Right? That was a good lesson for me. There are many things that you've never seen in this world. And there's even more things that in the next world that we haven't seen. مَا لَا عَيْنٌ رَأَتْ وَلَا أُذُنٌ سَمِعَتْ وَلَا خَطَرَ عَلَى قَلْبِ بَشَرٍ. No eye has seen or ear has heard or even occurred to the heart of a human being. That's the akhirah. Ibn Abbas said, لَيْسَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا الْأَسْمَاء. The only thing the dunya and akhirah share is the names. The realities are completely different. So it's, when the Quran says there's grapes in paradise, don't think they're like these grapes down here, right? Where you have to spit out the seeds. So that's important. And then dress also. There are hadiths about man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum. Whoever imitates a people is from them. And so one of my teachers, Abdullah At-Tiridi, who was a student of Sheikh Al-Ghumari, and I actually have ijazah from him from Morocco. Sheikh Al-Ghumari was very rigid and strict about things, and he wrote books. Sheikh Abdullah has a book, Al-Istinfar fi Ghazar al-Tashabbuh bil-Kuffar, like calling people to fight the ghazwa of not imitating the kuffar. And that's his book. And it's all these hadiths. It's a litany of hadith about not imitating non-Arabs, about don't dress like the Ajam, and don't... Sidi al-Mawaq said all of the hadith that relate to not imitating the Ajam are specific to the Arab. They have no relationship to Ajam that become Muslim. So this idea of not dressing like, and then you see converts who suddenly put on a robe and a ghutra, thinking that this is Islam. There's no dress of Islam. There is no dress in this religion that is specific to the religion. The Prophet ﷺ wore a Habashi shirt. He wore a Roman shirt. It was a Romani, qamis Romani. Kana dayiq. It had narrow sleeves. He wore a Yemeni red striped jubba that one of the Sahaba said, I never saw anything more beautiful than the Prophet in that red striped jubba, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he was international in his dress. He didn't wear anything specific to indicate. Now he did wear a turban. And he did cover his head. But he also went hasir al-ras to show that it wasn't haram not to cover your head. The Andalusians, the urf of the Andalusians was not to wear anything on their head. So the Andalusians did not, in Mauritania, the Mauritanian urf for the men is not to wear anything. They have the turban wrapped around their neck, and then when they go out in the sun, they put it on. Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya, all the time, he just, right when he gets inside, he pulls off his turban and he puts it down, right? So the turban, undeniably, it's arguable that it's from the Sunnah. There's a khilaf about it, but it's arguable. But, let me give you an example. The Maliki said, it's only Sunnah if you do it with tahniq. So you have to do the turban wrapped under the chin, because that's the way the Prophet ﷺ wore his turban, with a du'aba, wearing like the way Jama'at Tabligh puts down and has two, they have two coming out. The Prophet did that, but he wore it under his neck. And this is why the Muhannak was the alim who had the tahniq. He reached a level and he started wearing the turban with the tahniq. So Uthman Danfodio says, if it doesn't have the tahniq, it's not sunnah. So if you put a turban on your head, it's a turban, but it's not the sunnah turban. That's his opinion. Other scholars didn't go by that. So these are khilaf issues. So if the urf is not to wear the hat, which is the common urf in most places now, not to cover the head for males, but it's actually not good for you because the sun goes through the hair, and if you're in areas where there's a lot of sun, it's actually very bad to be exposed to sun. You can get cancer. That's why if you go to a dermatologist, they'll check your hair, under your hair, because it's a very common place to get skin cancer. And we know now that exposure to the sun is except for very small amounts to get your vitamin D, like 10 minutes a day maximum. But other than that, it's not a good thing to be exposed to the sun. And people that have a lot of sun exposure, they wrinkle quicker, they have a lot of skin problems, especially if they're from northern climates. So traditionally, people covered their head, in both male and female. Now, female coverage is the urf of the Bani Adam. I mean, women have covered their head in every civilization, except for Aboriginal peoples who usually wore very limited. They didn't have textiles, so they didn't make cloth. Most of them wore skins and things like that. Aboriginal peoples and the elite, who have always not done those things. But the Byzantine women covered completely, like a lot of some of the areas in the Gulf, the modern Gulf Arabs, where they cover even with the niqab. That was a Byzantine tradition. And Marshall Hodgson argues that it actually was adopted by the Muslims from the Byzantines, because it was the elite women that covered their faces, not the common women. And historically, in the Muslim world, it was the elite women, which is why on Hajj they're not allowed to cover their face, because it was something that distinguished the wealthy from the poor. So the women on Hajj weren't supposed to cover their face. And that's a khilaf issue. I don't want to get into that, because some madhabs say that the face is awra. The majority is not. But there are some of the ulama that said the face of a woman is awra, she should cover her face. It's a weak opinion, traditionally. And then they say the fasad al-zaman, a relative hukum about fasad al-zaman, because there's an argument that every zaman outside of the prophetic period was a corrupt period. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. يختص النهي بما يفعله الأعاجم على خلاف مقتضى شرعنا. أما ما فعلوه على وفق الندب أو الإيجاب أو الإباحة في شرعنا فلا نترك ذلك لأجل تعاطيهم إياه. So if non-Muslims, he's really talking about non-Muslims here. If non-Muslims do something, the prohibition of imitating them is in only those things that go against our Sharia. As for what they do that is either encouraged or an obligation or permitted in our Sharia, we don't leave it because they do it. Right? We don't leave it because they do it. ينبغي للمتورع أن يتورع في خاصة نفسه ولا يحل له ولا يجوز أن يحمل عليه أهله وعياله. The one who is scrupulous in his practice should only be scrupulous in what pertains to himself. It is not permissible for him to force his family or his children to follow that same. This is great wisdom, because this is what drives kids out of Islam. When you try to force them, you take the strictest opinions and you try to force it on your children, it makes them rebel. This is great wisdom.